Today, I would like to welcome Antonia Landi. She had her first gigs especially in tech at Rockstar Games, so we have something in common. I started in gaming as well. She set up different departments in different organizations for more agile processes from the scratch, and she leads all the product management efforts at Living Packets with Packets, which is a great company, I would say, because they have the mission to enable the circular economy for the good of our planet, which they do by really cool reusable boxes, which are a bit techy. And she's speaking a lot in Dublin, Madrid, San Francisco, and so on. And where we met, that was at the so-called Prod MBA, because the both of us are an alumni. And Prod, this product PS that you're just participating, was my answer out of this, my project that I started with this Prod MBA. So with no further ado, I'm very happy to welcome you, Antonia.
Thank you. So let me just start sharing my screen. Okay. Good. Give me a second. Sharing.
Yes, we can see your inbox.
My emails, lovely. So, and presenting. Can everybody see okay? Fantastic. So today, let's talk about imposter syndrome. This topic is something that's quite dear to my heart because I've always felt imposter syndrome at various times in my career. And the more I talk about this, the more people actually come to me and say, oh, I felt exactly the same thing. So why not talk about it? First of all, we're going to focus a little bit on imposter syndrome in product and why it's so prevalent in product. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let me put up the gallery view so that I can see you all. Who here plays Among Us? Show of hands. Amazing. So first of all, we should get a group together to play Among Us. But so we're quite familiar with what an imposter is, right? This is the dictionary definition, to be a cliche. One that assumes false identity or title for the purpose of deception. And a lot of the time, this can look something like this. I'm underqualified for this. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, or even the infamous, how did I even get hired, right? There's always this sort of feeling of somehow I managed to trick people into thinking I'm competent, and sooner or later it's going to come out that actually I'm wildly incompetent, that they made a mistake hiring me, and it's all going to come crashing down. Again, a little show of hands. Who has actually felt imposter syndrome at one point or other? Okay, so actually most, if not all of us. Okay, when does it arise? And I thought about this quite a long time. So does it arise when I'm feeling particularly out of my comfort zone, or because I'm having an off day, or because my confidence is low? But typically the one thing all these situations have in common is that it's usually something new. It could be a new position, maybe you got promoted, or you changed companies, so you have a new environment. It's typically when we do something where I guess we just haven't built our confidence yet, right? We're not quite in the flow of things. It's something happens that is left of field we didn't expect. And all of a sudden we feel like, I can't do this at all. But why does it happen in product? So I think there's quite a few factors. There is this sort of sink or swim mentality, right? Just throwing people into the deep end and like, you'll figure it out as you go along. Improper onboarding, this kind of feeling of everybody for themselves, especially in product. I think it's quite competitive environment. It's very fast paced. it's more likely that you're sort of being left to your own devices and being left to figure out things by yourself, because everybody is so extremely busy around you. But actually, the most jarring one is that there is no formal career path into product, right? Although nowadays you do see some product related university courses, but in general, 90% of people I speak to that are in product came from another discipline. Could be design, could be engineering, could be QA. So of course, we don't really know what being competent looks like. So we constantly question ourselves, like why am I in this career path, right? How did I get here? Maybe I'm not supposed to be in product. Maybe I should go back to being an engineer, because I can't solve all these problems. So I think that's a really interesting point here, that if we think about it, we're all self-taught. Even if we attend courses, we all do this by our own initiative. It's not like you get a certificate that says you're a product manager now and you're confidently, going into product management jobs. How do you recognize it? Because sometimes it's not super clear whether, is it imposter syndrome? Am I having an off day? But typically, if you feel certain things very often or recurring, it's more likely that it's not just a one-off. It really is imposter syndrome. So feeling incompetent to the point where you see no way out, right? Feeling incompetent is fine if everybody feels it on any given day, saying, okay, this is a brand new task. I've never done this before. But when it really is recurring and you feel like, I really have no idea what I'm doing with any of my tasks, then it could be imposter syndrome. Obsessing over everything your manager says, that's something I'm definitely guilty of. So really trying to read between the lines of any offhand joke or comment, and actually secretly they think I'm totally incompetent. And you can really think yourself into a downward spiral. And of course, being overwhelmed by routine tasks. So if you're at the point where even something you were comfortable with beforehand now seems insurmountable, that's a good indicator that you're not just having an off day, this is imposter syndrome. And one of the things that I'd really like to touch on here is that leaving imposter syndrome unaddressed can really train you to become less competent, right? You question yourself at every given opportunity, meaning that you're probably conveying information with less confidence. And conveying information as a product person is our bread and butter. That's what we do. And if all of a sudden you start doing it less confidently, you start questioning yourself out in the open, I mean, people will also start questioning you. And that can just get worse and worse. But luckily, after dealing with it so many times, I have found a few tips and tricks that have helped me immensely. And I hope they're going to help you as well. So let's see. Ask your peers for feedback. Because a lot of the times I noticed that when I was feeling really low confidence, really incompetent, I spoke to my colleagues about how they see me in my job, and their perception of what I was doing was completely different. So in my mind, I was this incredibly incompetent person that was just there because I managed to trick some people into hiring me. But actually, on the outside, I was still, competent. Nobody saw anything wrong with the way I was doing things. But obviously, in order to really absorb what your peers are telling you, you need to be willing to listen. And it's going to be scary, right? Because the thing we're most afraid of is that we're not good at our job. And it's scary to ask someone to point out what's something that I can do better. But facing that fear, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well, facing that fear of saying, okay, this is something that I genuinely need to improve upon, can already help you feeling more empowered in changing your direction. Change your environment. And that's something that I really only noticed maybe a year ago, right? If you sit next to your manager, sit with your team for half a day, see how that is. It's possible that you have quite an overbearing supervisor or manager that has a lot on their plate and all their feedback to you sounds very harsh. Maybe you have different ways of communicating. Just try to get out of that bubble and sit with people that make you feel good about yourself. And if you're overwhelmed by a particular task and you're just staring at your screen, tabbing through different documents, not really knowing where to start, go on a walk. Much better if it's cold outside because it'll really wake you up. And then come back to it with fresh eyes. Because a lot of the time, again, we can get into these downward spirals just because we're thinking to ourselves, I'm incompetent, I can't do this, it's far too big, there's so much risk, blah, 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 blah. Just go outside, change your environment, look at trees or birds or whatever, and then you can come back refreshed and thinking about the next smallest step you can take. And friendly reminder, nobody expects you to be superhuman. Again, this is something that I've had to learn. Nobody expects you to be perfect. Everybody knows that we have our ups and downs and we learn new things as we gain experience. And we need to be just kinder to ourselves. So if you're thinking that you're incompetent because you screwed one thing up, stop. You're there for a reason. People have believed in you. That's why you're there. And you just need to accept that you won't be able to do everything perfectly. And that's fine because nobody expects you to do it perfectly. Again, break it down into the smallest actionable task. You don't need to move mountains day one. If you have a huge project, think of the smallest thing you could do on that day that will move you towards the right direction. And then you can just every day start chipping a little bit more off the mountain, and eventually you will have moved it. But if you are feeling like you're expected to do more than you can deliver, you need to have an honest conversation about it. It is also, of course, possible that you're in a very, high energy, fast-paced environment where it's do or die. And if you can't deal with that, you need to address it for your own good. And this is something I always like to ask myself. What would I do if I was 100% confident? And just doing that mental exercise, thinking about it. Okay, if I had absolutely no chance of messing up, if I was super confident right now, super competent right now, what would I do? And then thinking about your answer, figure out what's stopping you to get to that point. Is it a lack of information? If it is, you can start gathering that information. Great, now you have a first step forward. Is it a lack of mandate? Or is it really, really just purely irrational? And more often than not, it does end up being an irrational fear. Speaking of fear, face your fear. The fear of making a mistake is often worse than actually making one. And I'm not saying go out there and deliberately do things wrong or make a mistake, but if you happen to have made one, don't hide from it, don't shy away from it. It's absolutely normal. And being willing and ready to own up to your mistakes. First of all, it helps you find areas of improvement, and it makes you human, right? We're, as product managers, we tend to feel like we need to have all the answers. And that's not what our job is about. Our job is to find the answers. And if we don't know in that moment, then we don't know. And that's perfectly fine. Tell them, you know what, I'll find out and I'll get back to you. Last but not least, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Take up space. And I think this one tends to be more relevant for women, but it's also relevant for everybody else. So if you're standing, have your feet hip width apart. If you're sitting, spread your elbows, have your hands on the table, lean into the conversation. You don't need to shy away from it. Have your hands in your lap, kind of be balled up. It's not going to make you feel good. And as well, if you tend to speak quietly, practice projecting your voice. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how to speak better, speak louder, project your voice without making you feel uncomfortable. If you're talking to somebody, look up, look straight ahead, preferably make eye contact. Don't look down. Don't look at your shoes, because it's not going to make you feel good about yourself. And if you're ahead of a big presentation or a big meeting, listen to a song that gets you fired up. Really try and harness that energy that you have within yourself. And very final thought, this is something that I always remind myself of. When you're thinking, I can't do this, think, I can't do this yet. There is always room for learning. There is always room for improvement. And the things that you are so incredibly insecure about could actually become your biggest strengths. And that is already it for my portion of today.
Thank you very much, Antonia. It was very
You're
inspiring. I hope that everybody was benefiting just as me. And there's some room for questions. Let's do this in a second when we set up the breakout rooms. I can just I already sent in the chat the links to the Jamboard. So it would be great if you look into the chat and find the link to the Jamboard. Let me just to be sure, because I think somebody moved out in the meantime and came back. I will just come on, share the link once again. If you are on the Jamboard, then you can already start taking a sticky from the left side. There you add your name. So Sören already made a start. So you can add your name and move it to one of the topics which are there in the room, or you can create your own topic if you like.